Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, Honorable Minister, Honorable Assistant Director General Madam Janini, and distinguished colleagues. I will take further the presentation and some of the elements that Madam Janini just presented regarding the state of higher education and the state of recognition of qualifications globally. And in a way, taking you through more detailed information this afternoon. Madam Jenny just mentioned, we reached 264 million students enrolled in higher education globally. But obviously, we started from very far. We started with 100 million around 20 years ago. And we see the growth in all part of the world. We see the growth in different regions. In the world, there is no region where there is no growth in terms of enrollment in higher education. Of course, this growth shouldn't hide a situation where we have differences across regions. In some regions, we have reached almost 80% of gross enrollment rate, while in others, we are still at around 9% of enrollment, gross enrollment. That means that there is a task for the international community that turns this, what you call part of the right to education, access to higher education in global. But it's very important that we take, I would say, the spots of the differences in terms of access to higher education globally. Madam Jenny mentioned also that by now we have 7.3 million students that are mobile. But again, we have an even situation where people move more to the north than to the south. We have seen mobility from to Europe and less so to, for example, Africa. And that's what the international community should advance. Is that mobility that is much more, I would say, a shared mobility that allows not only people to get access to higher education in specific regions, but access to different modalities, different cultural opportunities, different learning opportunities, and different pedagogy that can be in a way advanced in different regions. The good news that we have by now reached around 100 members that have ratified the regional or the global convention or both conventions. And that means that we have more than 100 countries that have adhered to specific principles of recognition of education that are fair, transparent, inclusive, and that are taking into account the principles that are embedded in all the conventions that we have adopted recently, and this new generation of conventions, starting from the Lisbon Convention, Tokyo, Buenos Aires, Addis Convention, and the Arab Convention recently. And of course, the Global Convention becomes like an umbrella that brings all these conventions together. And it is proud for us to have the first UN treaty on higher education adopted by the General Conference, adopted and entering into force in 2023, that established these universal principles. That's something that we should cherish and to valorize as something that is common to us. It's common principles and common to all higher education systems, wherever they are. But it's very important, I think Madam Jenny mentioned that the convention is not only a normative instrument, it's not only a legal aspect, it's also a vision that we are having, a vision for a higher education system, an international cooperation, solidarity area where we can share principles, where we can support each other, and where we recognize skills and qualifications across border. So beyond, I would say, the normative aspect and an instrument, a legal instrument, is that vision that we are sharing for common principles and common area of higher education. So what the conventions and the global conventions specifically allow? First of all, we have mentioned that several occasions facilitated mobility. It also respects the domestic laws and institutional autonomy, particularly the university's autonomy, the academic freedom, as was mentioned. It doesn't require automatic recognition. It's about, I would say, understanding the qualification and recognizing the skills and qualification. But it provides also that inclusive and fair recognition, including, for example, for refugees, for displaced persons, or for people who need additional support. And of course, this brings benefits to learners and students, for in terms of access to higher education internationally, in terms of support entry to labor market, in terms of helping refugees and displaced persons. It also it brings value to institutions in terms of enhancing the quality of building trust among institutions, particularly higher education institutions, fostering this international cooperation and exchanges, diversifying mobile students and diversifying student profiles. Probably what is also important that is sometimes neglected, it can bring to state parties, and that's why we are encouraging member states to ratify the convention. It can bring, it can foster inbound and outbound mobility for students. It can also bring better economic returns in terms of productivity and filling skill shortages and reducing those shortages. It strengthens international cooperation, but also it can enable peer learning and knowledge sharing, and that's part of how we see the global convention. Minister, don't get scared. We are still 38, because when you ratify the convention, it takes 3 months before you become state party. But you are already in the mapping. What is important, and I think is very critical, is that the global convention includes state parties from all over the regions of the world. It includes countries from all income levels, from low income to middle income to high income countries, and it involves countries with very small higher education system to some of the largest higher education systems in the world. And that diversity is very critical, and that's what brings value and, I would say, force to the global convention. Is this, inclusiveness from different regions and different countries, and different perspectives on higher education, and different tradition of higher education systems. Let me move to, and Madam Janini mentioned some of the features and how the global convention reinforces trust and of course the quality and reliability of qualification, because state parties are expected to share information regarding their qualification system, to share information regarding their quality assurance system. It promotes inclusion and lifelong learning, because in the convention we are expecting that member states and state parties will accept partial studies, will accept the validation of prior learning, will recognize displaced persons. So it takes that type of learning perspective. It's also about sharing information regarding higher education systems, and that's part of the engagement that we put in the operation guidelines. And of course, it's about networking and building this collaboration among member states. So the call for ratification is to all member states and all colleagues. And of course, you can reach out to us, you can request information, support, and we have developed, and of course the Bureau and the groups that are working under the global convention have developed a set of resources that can be used for countries for ratifying the global convention as well as the regional convention, and we would like to ratify UNESCO's convention wherever you belong to, and you can ratify different conventions if you are in different regions as well. So you can use these resources also for informing your process of ratification. But we remain at your disposal through our field offices, through our institute, and of course through the headquarter team to provide that support. I thank you.
Thank you very much for your informative and precise presentation. Now I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Stig Ahmed Sharman, Chairperson of the Bureau Global Convention. Please.
Assalamu alaikum. Most of all, Honorable Minister Sharifov, representatives of UNESCO's Director General, Excellencies, dear friends, it is a great pleasure to be here with you today on this occasion of the announcement of Uzbekistan joining the family of the state parties to the Global Convention. And as we have seen from the Minister's presentation earlier today, it is rapid developments taking place in the Uzbekistan higher education system. It is a drive for internationalization that we're witnessing. It is a focus on diversity, it is a focus on quality, and it's also a focus on connecting with the world, both through partnerships, through transnational education, through foreign campuses, and joint degrees. And in order to actually succeed, one of the key elements is, ladies and gentlemen, recognition. Without having a system for fair, transparent, and anti-discriminatory recognition, the strategies will not reach its full potential. Uzbekistan is on its journey to become an important player in international higher education, in a landscape that is changing tremendously fast. The so-called Big Four, the US, Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom, is reducing the number of international students for various reasons. The demand, as we heard from Stefania Giannini, is increasing. And this opens up a great opportunity for new countries also to take part in recruiting international students, to internationalize their education systems, and then one needs principles of recognition. And the IT is quite old, and it started at the UNESCO General Conference back in 1947, on the second General Conference of UNESCO, taking place also outside of Paris, this time in Mexico City. It was decided that UNESCO needed to look into what was described as the problems with differences in university degrees worldwide. So it's been on the agenda. First, we had regional conventions of the first degree. Then there was a 1993 recommendation that really didn't take much force. Later we had regional conventions that were mentioned by my colleague Bohim Chakru earlier, including the Lisbon Convention and the Tokyo Convention, which is particularly relevant to this region. But eventually one saw that students didn't just move to the neighboring countries, and within the regions, students moved across the regions. And around 2010, one started to toss with the idea, maybe we also need a global convention. And so the work was adopted at a UNESCO conference, and after a period with feasibility studies, 2 of them actually, and then we had the committee that looked into the draft for 2 years, and then we had the intergovernmental negotiations. Finally, in 2019, the states could agree on the text. And then it was just a little bit of the way. We had a pandemic coming right after. Student mobility didn't surface as the most important and pressing issue during that period. However, in 2023, we had 20 state parties, which was lovely. And we could have the first conference of the state parties. We had the second one now in June this year. And what is wonderful now, as also Bohim Chakru mentioned, is that we're moving to more tools that is useful for the state parties, for governments, for authorities, and in particular for universities, where actually most of the admission and recognition work is taking place. We have now the operational guidelines adopted, which in more, let's say, university language, less legal language, is explaining how to potentially operationalize it. Not looking at it as an obligation that you have to do this, but presenting it as an opportunity for educational systems and institutions to align their strategies with the global convention. In the upcoming 2-year period, this 2-year period in which also Uzbekistan will be sitting around the table in 2027 as a state party, we aim also to adopt 3 so-called subsidiary texts. We call it guidelines because it's more common language and understanding. They're all very important. The first one is on quality assurance, including transnational education. The core of recognition and mobility is trust. And by establishing principles of what constitutes quality and quality assurance, that will help the basis of recognition. But also addressing the particularities of transnational education, which is a phenomenon which is spreading fast and has new forms almost every year. This poses challenges to recognition. And with the guidelines, we hope to assist the member states and the state bodies and universities on how to deal with this in an efficient way. Secondly, we will also develop guidelines for a recognition of refugees and displaced persons qualifications. Many of you may have heard about UNESCO's qualification passport, which is an international tool that has been developed. There also exists national schemes, and the guidelines aim to assess universities and authorities and ministries and state bodies on how to deal with the challenges where documentary evidence is missing. This can happen to refugees, but it can also be displaced persons and persons in different types of situations. That is really one important core of the global convention. Thirdly, we have the regional conventions, we have the global convention, they have the same objectives, but they don't say things exactly the same way, for good reasons. They were written in different time periods, it's different cultural contexts. So we will aim to develop also a subsidiary text that is advising the actors on how to deal with this when there are differences. Secondly, we also hope that this subsidiary text will build a global ecosystem between the regional conventions and the global conventions in a way where the system works seamlessly. Because as some may believe, the global convention is on top of the regional convention. No, it's not. It's kind of binding it together, but from a legal point of view, they are equal normative instruments. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to visit Samarkand, to be at the General Conference. My congratulations to Uzbekistan to becoming the 39th state party of the Global Recognition Convention.